very good to see you here tonight on this lovely sunny evening. And our topic tonight is saving our seas, saving ourselves. But we're going to begin with an opening prayer, which Catherine is going to pray for us and with us.
Heavenly Father, the psalmist said, "Let the sea resound and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." Thank you for the seas and oceans. Help us to be mindful of how precious and vulnerable they are. Help us to understand more this evening about the effect of our lifestyles on the oceans. Be with Jane as she speaks, guiding our thoughts on how we can care for and work to restore the seas and the life that depends on them. Amen.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, now, Jane Ripley, who's going to be our speaker tonight, was born a few hundred yards from the sea, a stone's throw from the church her family attended. She worked as a water pollution analyst, mostly lab-based, and later she returned to live on the south coast again. These days, she teaches science units to healthcare students, where pollution and health perfectly overlaps. And she says of herself that gardening, walking, and longbow archery, which intrigued me, Jane, are your stress buttons, and environmental activism and science are her calling, and all are her passions. She has 2 sons, 2 stepdaughters, 3 grandchildren, and she says far too many Great Danes, one of whom is a little bit poorly at the moment and is sleeping beside her. So Jane's going to talk to us, and then we'll break out into groups to discuss some questions a little bit before the end of her talk. And we'll come back from the breakout rooms and Jane will show us a few more slides and then we'll have a question and answer session. So, Jane, over to you, and Catherine's going to show your slides.
Thank you, Barbara. So, I've always said that I would do anything for my children, and actually I found that being put to the test rather more than I'd hoped in the last few years. I didn't think I would have to fight for them to have clean water to swim in and a livable world to live in, but here we all are. As Barbara said, I grew up in Hastings. I went away to university, came back about 10 years later and brought my children up by the sea. If I go out of my house from the front, the next neighbour would be in France. So that's how close I live to the sea, and we walk on the hilltops every day. So as in my work life as a water pollution chemist, I've been very closely involved with water, and I've always had an edge to my world. I've always found it very uncomfortable to live anywhere that doesn't have the sea running alongside it. With the next slide, thank you. And then also as a Christian, the silvery thread of the living waters runs through my spiritual life as well, from the moment I was baptized and then my children were baptized. We take it as much part of our life, and I take it as cleansing my soul as much for granted as I take the water that comes from my tap to cleanse my body. And my church, where we were all baptized, my mum's funeral about a year ago, I was married, my children were baptized, and it's called St Mary's Star of the Sea, and we have an annual blessing of the sea. So the whole environment is very much based on the sea. Next one, next slide. Thank you. So as a scientist, and especially since I've been teaching it to healthcare students, because I used to talk about water on the outside and looking at water pollution, but then teaching healthcare students had to make the connection between water and pollution and how much the body relies on that. And it's quite fascinating, the fact that it makes up so much of our body, it makes up so much of the world's surface that I think we don't even think about. When you look at a globe and you see how much seawater there is in the bottom half, we tend to kind of concentrate on the top half of the globe. And water, the way water behaves, it's got some very special properties. For example, when it fizzes, it floats, and most things, when they become a solid, they would sink. But that property gives aquatic life the ability to survive a winter, because if you imagine it freezing from the bottom upwards, everything that lived in the water would end up on the top and frozen and dead. So that's one of those things that sets it apart. It's a universal solvent, so everything that we need to move in and out of the cells of our body rely on water. It's the thing we look for on other planets. It's given us a massive bit of power steering with global heating, because it is absorbing 90% of that, and we hope that it keeps on doing that while we figure the climate issue out as well. And then once you go into the body, we couldn't breathe without moisture lining the lungs to getting carbon dioxide out and oxygen in. All of our digestive system wouldn't work. You know what happens to people when they're underhydrated? Kidneys wouldn't work. Helps us to maintain pH levels and our heat control. And from the very moment of conception, we're bathed in that mini ocean of the amniotic fluid. So it's really part of all of us from the moment of conception. We have the only beach launched fishing fleet in the UK. It's very sustainable. That picture down on the lower left hand corner is our fleet, and that cliff top, if you go back in a little bit, that's where I live. So you can see I chose a house that was way up away from the flooding, because I had a bit of an idea about that. But despite having a very sustainable fishing fleet, we've still got a huge problem with our marine protected areas being bottom trawled and dredged. And I'll talk a little bit about that, because we've got a really amazing project going on in Sussex. I'll talk to you about that at the end. And we always think of fishing being a part of so many Bible stories, Jesus being a fisher of men. So to have a fishing fleet that's our community's been based around for hundreds of years is a really special thing. But if we keep on harvesting the sea as we are, then by quite a few different sources accounts that we could run out in less than a quarter of a century, which I think is quite scary. Next one. And we have, as well as our fishing fleet, we have tourism. People have come here since Victorian times to take the waters. They're not so keen on it at the moment, because they've got rather a lot of sewage in them, and that puts people off. That impacts hugely on a town that relies on its tourism, and people don't. It doesn't make us anywhere different to anywhere else if they can't go on the beach and in the sea. So keeping the water clean is a really big thing for us in a financial way. And also, people, when you live or you even spend time in blue spaces, much as you do when you spend it in green spaces, you feel that stress starting to ebb away. I always used to say the children would come home and sleep so well because they'd been on the beach all day. And it's a relaxed tired, it's not a stressed tired. And I've always felt that that's God's peace just flowing through me and just bringing me back down to earth and saying, this is what's really important. So as well as fish, we get all sorts of other stuff from the sea. Medicines, there are cancer treatments, painkillers, anti-inflammatories, so many, but I can't name them all. And we use the sea to cool our power stations, so that when we're producing nuclear energy, we need a good supply of water. And whether that's going to be useful, putting nuclear power stations near water when we're more likely to have storm surges and flooding in the future, is a debatable point. That's Dungeness, which is just a little bit east from us around the coast. And I've noticed there's been 3 flood alerts for Dungeness in the last year. That site's decommissioned, but it does sort of ring alarm bells for me a little bit when we put infrastructure in that's got to last a long time, and it's dependent on the sea levels staying at the same level. So could you, next one please, Barbara? Thank you. And in return for all these wonderful things the sea gives us, we put back an awful lot of waste. We expect it to take our sewage, and the picture on the left is between Barbara and I's house, which is at Bulverhythe. The sewage overflowed and it went into people's houses, and the beach was in a quiet state for a long time, and we have to have it pumped out. And also plastic pollution, which I'm sure you will know, our old friend the oil industry, as it stops being able to sell us so many hydrocarbons for oil, for fuel, they would like to sell us it in a different way, and to make plastic will do them just fine. We see the same playbook coming into action with them selling us single-use plastics without any regard for the fact that it will cause so much pollution, and it already is. If you think of things like the Pacific island of plastic where the sea currents meet, it's been there for about 50 years, and if we carry on putting plastic in the ocean, it will just get worse and worse. And we only see a small amount of it. The almost three quarters will go under the water and will just causing problems for an awfully long time. Next one, please. If any of you are as old as me, you'll remember words like the Omoko Cadiz and the Torrey Canyon and the Deepwater Horizon, and we think of all those awful oil spills. Luckily, considering 50% of ships afloat at any one time are carrying oil, most of them don't crash and have an awful oil spill like we used to see in the 70s and 80s, but we do have an awful lot of spills, just little ones going on all the time. There's a lot going in from people washing out their bilges of their boats around the world, and also from drains coming from roads. So anything that goes down the drain will end up in the sea. And the little picture at the bottom is a screenshot I took this week from the Oceana website. They've got a really great interactive tool where you can see oil spills in the North Sea, and that's just this year. So there's been all those little ones. That we did have quite a nasty one in February, I think, a few weeks ago, and these chemical spills and oil spills, which average about 2 a day, are causing problems all the time. So they might not be the great big ones that make the headlines, but they're certainly causing problems for organisms that live in the area. See dolphins, right from dolphins down to very small filter feeders being affected. And the oil industry will say, well, it's just a fraction of a percent and we're allowed to do that. But when you're producing millions and millions and millions of barrels, a fraction of a percent ends up being quite a considerable amount. Next one. And something I noticed when I was on holiday in Spain once, I thought, God, people must really smoke a lot on the beach. And I didn't realise at the time that a lot of that had come down the drains where people just used to be able to stub out their cigarettes, and it went down the drain and ended up in the sea and then coming back up on the beach. But that's the most discarded item, and the filters tend to last a long time, and that's where the most toxic parts have been filtered out, so people didn't breathe it in. But then animals in the environment end up, and this, I think it's a really sad picture of a chick being fed a filter from a cigarette. Next one. Something that's coming up and is a hot topic at the moment is deep sea mining. As we push for electrification, which we need to because of climate change, the minerals have to come from somewhere. The battery manufacturers say that they can manage with what we get from land, but of course the mining outfits would really like to sell them some from the deep sea because there's a lot down there, have polymetallic nodules which contain all sorts of different minerals which are good for lots of things, but the green transition as well. So I have to be mindful about biodiversity as we move towards using less fossil fuels. And we had a really great treaty, the UN High Seas Treaty, which was signed just over 2 years ago. When I first wrote this PowerPoint, it had only just been got over the line, and it had taken 20 years. So we were all really pleased, and there's 91, I think, countries who have signed it, but just over 2 years later, most of those countries haven't ratified it. So the ones that have are the low-lying states, so the small island states, Bangladesh. We haven't, even though it's on the UK government website that we will. So I'm hoping that they will get on with that, because we have committed to protect 30% of the world's oceans as well as 30% of the world's land by 2030, and we're a signatory to that biodiversity COP. So that's really important that the government get on with that. And if you get the chance to say anything to your MP, that would be a good thing. Lots of people really enjoy going and looking at things in the sea. They go to do diving in tropical countries, and it's lovely warm water, and they often wear sunscreen. And unfortunately, the thing that they've come to see will be affected by sunscreen. It's got a chemical in it called oxybenzone, which is toxic. And we think that it means the coral can't sort of be so resilient to heat stress and marine heat waves. So on its own, it's possibly not such a problem. And there is a bit of discussion about whether concentrations are high enough to cause too many problems on their own. But when you add it to the other stresses like the heat in water, it's definitely a bit of a problem. So something we think we're doing a good thing, it could actually be damaging the thing we're looking at. Next one. And you may have seen last year, this hit the headlines about the collapse of the AMOC. And I'll give you a little, if you can start looking at the diagram at the very top of the red current going up. So tip of the northerly bit where it drops down. So what I'm in here is everything on the red part of this, like a conveyor belt, is bringing warm water from the tropics, and it's quite near the surface, so it's bringing that heat along up the Atlantic. It will pick up and sort of join with the Gulf Stream as well, goes up our east coast, and that's why we can grow palm trees in the east of Scotland, because that latitude shouldn't be that warm. So that brings the warmer air with it, and then when it gets far enough north, excuse me, the water will cool, and cooler water is denser, so it will drop. And then when it's working normally, it will come back at in a deeper depth, and that will bring oxygen and nutrients with it and come back down to the tropics. And that works much like our own circulation system does when we need to cool down our core. It distributes the heat around, so it takes the cool water down to the tropics and then brings the warmer water up. And there's one that does the same thing at the other end of the earth, but this is the one that we look, and it's called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. And that's been working completely fine up until some researchers started to look at whether there was a possibility of this slowing or collapsing. And if it does collapse, then that means that that heat isn't brought up to us. And the reason they think it might collapse is because when you get to that very northerly point, instead of dropping, staying the same salinity and dropping deep and then coming back down to the tropics, we've got a lot of glacial meltwater, and that's making the water less salty. So if it's less salty, less saline, it won't drop. It's not so dense. So it tends to stay at the top. And you know, with any conveyor belt, if you've got one part, all of the rest of it can't keep turning. So it's one of those things, people were really worried about it last year, and it was driving me mad because the headlines were all saying the Gulf Stream might stop, but it's not the Gulf Stream, but they are associated. The current thoughts are that it could be between 4 and 15% slower. It's a statistical analysis. The reason it hit the headlines was because the likelihood of it slowing or stopping completely between now and the end of this century is pretty high, and they'd put statistically that it was most high around the middle of the century, which everybody suddenly realised wasn't very far away at all, and would make our winters 10 to 15 degrees colder, would make our summers much, much drier. So it would completely impact on our farming and our ability to be in any way resilient to the climate crisis. Next one. And this is the sea surface temperatures. I put this on a couple of days ago. If you look at the lines at the top of the graph, the yellow one is 2024 and the red one is 2025. So that's why it sort of stops where we are. And you can see that they're right at the top. We're a little bit lower this year, but that's probably because we're in a La Nina year and 2024 was an El Nino year. So if you look at all of the other lines, you'll see that previous El Nino, our La Nina year this year is hotter than all the previous El Nino years. And that's just really, really worrying, because once you get more and more marine heat waves, you get these big dead spots. And that's our fishing and marine life. Just can't get anywhere else fast enough to survive. So next one. And I spent a lot of time explaining this to people when they were complaining last year that there were lots of slugs and it hadn't stopped raining. If you've got hotter sea surface temperatures, then just like when you warm up a pan of water, that will evaporate. It will sit in the atmosphere for a little while as water vapor clouds, but eventually what goes up must come down, and it comes back down as rain, as we've seen here. And as we've seen all around the world, because we have seen more and more extreme weather events with flooding, and then you get kind of flipping from drought to flood. And it's really that in the UK, we may not suffer the heat that we probably would if we were a little bit further south, but have your water cycle messed up is extremely damaging, and whether you can lose your home from flooding. So it really links in a lot, and people don't really realise that you only have to warm the sea surface temperatures by a couple of degrees to get this really big effect. Next one. And that's Hastings. So we had 2 flood events in 2023. They're supposed to be once a decade, but we had within 10 months. That caused millions of pounds worth of damage. They didn't build the town centre on a particularly useful place, but it is really close to the seafront, and originally it was a harbour. So those are the places that will see the flooding first, the most vulnerable places. We actually didn't around in that water. There were photos in the local paper. Next one. And this is my local area. So I just live above where it says Rock'n'All Beach, but luckily that's the top of a cliff. But that main road, the A259, is the main road all the way along the seafront, goes to Bexhill and on to Brighton, and it's carries a lot of traffic. So if that was to be flooded, this is not flooded all the time, but the threat of flooding at least once a year could cause an awful lot of disruption. Next one. Thanks. And that's our church, which, as you can see from the map on the right, is not very far away from the seafront, and it's sitting in a valley. The hill behind is the one that I live on, and there's another one the other side, and there's a stream that's been culverted under the road behind the church. So flooding that's to come over the beach would definitely affect our church just there. Next one. But it's not all bad news. We have got an amazing project in Sussex. About 4 years, yeah, they've just celebrated their 4th anniversary. We had a project started in Sussex, which was stopping the trawlers, so twin beam trawlers particularly. As you take the nets along the bottom of the ocean floor, take up everything, and they just leave a wasteland behind. And there's a diver called Eric Smith who went diving one day and everything was lovely, and he came to dive the next day and he saw the trawlers leaving, and when he went underwater he just came up and cried, And I've seen him give his talk, and he's been doing this for years, and he still cries when he remembers how awful to see this. So with the Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, not association, got this bylaw to ban trawlers in this particular area, 300 square kilometres. So it's a really big area, and it stretches from Southsea all the way along to Rye. And loads of people are involved, the universities, there's people doing their PhD research, there's people doing undergraduate research, citizen science, people can go out and see this kelp. And it's basically like rewilding a forest, but it's rewilding kelp under the sea. And already we're seeing lots of species return. There's black bream in the top corner, got short-nosed seahorses, lobsters coming back, although our crustaceans are quite badly affected by silt that comes down from the waterways, so that's runoff from farmland. Soil erosion. Humpbacks coming down, and that's a news article from January. Annoyingly, I was in bed with the temperature and I couldn't go out and see the humpbacks. I'm hoping they'll come again. We don't know, they normally go down the west coast, and to see them on the east coast is quite unusual. We don't know if that's because of warming waters or if it's because there's more food. We're hoping it's because there's more food from the rewilding of the kelp, because we like to see the big things, but the smaller things that we can't see at the bottom of those ecosystems, and then we can get the bigger things coming along that everybody oohs and ahs about. I think we have the next slide. I think that's the breakout. Yep.
We've got some questions I'm just going to put into the chat for you to talk about. What could you do locally and nationally, whether you are close to the sea or far away? So what could you do locally and nationally, close to the sea or far away? And what can you encourage your churches to take action about? And then we'll come back, and Jane's just got a little concluding half a dozen slides, and then we'll discuss it together. Welcome back, everyone. Let's see. So Jane's going to give a sort of concluding few remarks.
So I felt that I had to do something, and I couldn't just keep recording the decline of species and water quality. So I joined with Scientists for XR, and that's not just me on my own standing in the middle of Westminster holding a placard. There's lots and lots of us, and it's very empowering to say we know the data, we have given governments the data, and all we're doing is recording a decline, and we need you to step up and make the legislation and enact it. And that sign I'm holding there, which says 90% of Britain's offshore marine protected areas still bottom trawled and dredged. There's been a Marine Conservation Society report out in the last week or so, which states that it's now 98%. So things aren't getting better. We need the same protections that we've got off the coast of Sussex around the rest of the coast, and it could be a real flagship for nature to just come back, because you've only got to give it a very small window and it will come back. Next one. So things you could do, obviously we were there, I'm in that photo somewhere, we backed the Climate and Nature Bill, but we know that didn't quite pan out. So if you can still keep on our MPs to ask them to protect the highly protected marine areas by extending that trawler ban, make sure they ratify the High Seas Treaty. If you've got a local clean water action group, get involved with those. And climate issues, if we eat more plant-based meals, that's better, because then you're not heating up the climate, and we don't get so much problems with the sea surface temperatures heating up and the marine heat waves. And if you do eat seafood, if you could choose sustainable seafood, so things like not having farmed salmon, which causes, I didn't even touch on that today, but that's a whole load of other problems. single-use plastic we put in a group, that a lot of it ends up in the water, and if we don't use it, it won't end up there. Plus, we're not supporting the oil industry. Next one. Oh, I don't know what's happened to my slides, lost something in translation there. If you can support the ocean organisations, that was in 2 nice lines. Sending it across has done something. The ones I've put up are mostly Sussex based, so the Kelp Recovery Project and Sussex Underwater, but people like the Blue Marine Foundation, Oceana, Marine Conservation Society, you can go on their websites and then get signposted to other places, and they might show you the way to somewhere locally that you could get involved. I'm sorry, I can put that slide on the chat afterwards if it helps anyone.
I think we won't need you. I've got, yeah, I've got a reformatted copy that I can put on. So
okay, thank you. And I've had lots of fun as well. There was, some of you might recognise Jessica from MP Watch on the left-hand side. My husband's a plumber, so we have an access to a lot of toilets, and we popped them on the beach and sat on them to illustrate the sewage problem in the area. We got an awful lot. People really, really engaged with that humour. A lot of people know the problems. Most people know that there's sewage in our seas now, but to have it highlighted, and that picture went viral. I've seen it on Exxon Talk, and Fergal Sharkey retweeted us, so we got quite famous. And that's my granddaughter. So the baby you saw in the first slide, my son, he's now 30, and that's his daughter, and she's now 5, and she comes on protests with me. She asked me a few weeks ago, so when are we going on a protest, and is it going to be poo or is it going to be oil? But then she said she wanted to do the animal one because she doesn't like dressing up as poo and oil, which I've never asked her to do, but she's decided. She's usually a mermaid. So what I would like for her, because she will be 30 in 2050, which is a big date for us on climate and biodiversity, and I would like to think of her children on the beach as her dad did, and I did, and my mum did, and her mum did, and saying to her children that we didn't used to see all these species, we used to have sewage in the seas, we used to have awful climate change, but Nana Jane got together with lots of other people, and it was really hard, and sometimes they felt like they weren't going to get the end result, but they kept on, and in the end things got better. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
thank you so much, Jane. Wow,
Thank you, Jane.
so much in that.
That was lovely. That was super. Right, over now to everybody on the call. Is there anything you'd like to ask Jane? Anything you'd like to say? And that came out of the conversations just been having? Either put up your virtual hand or wave a hand. Yes, Anne.
Just a little question. Is kelp a euphemism for seagrass or vice versa? Because there was a project in Cornwall, they were planting seagrass, but is it the same as kelp?
It's a kind of a group, yeah. So
Yeah.
There's lots of varieties within it.
Right.
Ours is kelp. I don't know about the one in Cornwall actually.
No,
So
I'm not there anymore. I'm in Edinburgh near the Firth of Forth. So, and there's one organic farm there, only one, but it's yeah.
I mean, we've seen such a huge improvement. The lady that's doing the PhD research, nobody expected us to get such positive results within 4 years.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely worth doing, and obviously it draws down a lot of carbon, so it helps us with our climate change, and it helps with erosion of the coastlines, which obviously happens more when you've got rising sea levels and more storm surges and flooding. So it's just all round a really good thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, there's quite a few places along the south coast where there are plans in place to try and protect sea life. From what you said of the stats, I think the South Coast must have more protected areas than anywhere else.
I think because Eric Smith and his daughter Katrine set up this, they set up a group called Help the Kelp, and then they pushed for the bylaw with IFCA, and because we got that trawler bylaw, but because if you allow trawling in those marine protected areas, it just kind of degrades everything you're trying to do, and nothing can spread. And they don't just help the areas that are being kelp rewilded, because the things they might breed in there, but they don't stay in there. So the fishermen are already saying that in the fishing areas, they're seeing some stocks improving. We've had more tuna last year, sorry, I forget which year I'm in. So it's definitely helping. It'd just be nice if we could roll it out around the country, and then it will help us to meet our 30 by 30 commitments as well.
Absolutely. Daniel, you've got a question in the chat. Would you like to ask it yourself? You want to unmute, or would you like me to?
No, I can ask.
Okay, go on.
Oh, I was just interested in your comment about sustainable seafood. When you go to the supermarket, there's just fish on the counter and you don't have any clue really how it's been caught or anything. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about what you think of as sustainable seafood? Like, does that just mean you eat less fish, or can you be a bit more selective about what you eat? How would you describe that?
Well, we're really lucky because we've got fish, the fish shops on the shore. You can buy it and it comes straight off the ships, but I appreciate that not many people have got that. If it comes from some countries like the Norwegian ships, we've had a lot of trouble with our fishermen and the quotas, the Norwegian ships that come down and kind of take everything. So some countries, I don't want to completely write off a country though. I think definitely having less, buying from a fishmonger and asking where it's come from is a good way to go about it, because they're proud of their product, and if people ask for it, then they will endeavour to supply it. Things like anything that's farmed, like salmon or prawns, if they're cheap, they're usually not very sustainably fished, unfortunately. And I would say go a lot less, because if you've got, say, farmed salmon, they'll be trawling huge amounts of fish to make into fish meal to feed to the farmed fish, which seems like a really long way to go around to get some protein. So I think if we can avoid those sorts of things and just buy less, it's a bit like meat really, isn't it? If people can have less but better quality.
So would you include organic farmed salmon in that? If they also, would also have the problem of the fish being fished to make the fish meal to feed them, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would say if it's farmed, they're like intensive farms. I mean, maybe the organic ones aren't so bad, but it's still like intensive farming. It's like a chicken shed for fish. And the ones that aren't organic or sold as anything special are just in your kind of salmon and cream cheese sandwich from the supermarket. They're crawling in lice, they've got ulcers, they give disease to the wild fish that go past. There's lots of antibiotics used, lots of pesticides to try and get rid of, insecticides to get rid of the lice. It's just, I think if people could see it, they wouldn't eat it in their sandwiches for their lunch.
Yeah, very clear, Jane. Catherine.
Something that came up in our breakout group was that we can do what we can to clean up after a problem is caused. So litter picking, dredging out pollutant litter was an example, but we talked about addressing it at source. So actually some of the positive things Jane's talked about have been looking at how it can be stopped from happening in the first place. And I wondered if you could say anything more about that, Jane, about those.
Yeah, we have a lot of litter picking activities. We have beach cleans, and we also have, because we've got a lot of green councillors, they do very visible litter picking. And something that's really important is, as well as just picking up the rubbish and just disposing of it in the right place, is we need to stop it at source. That's the most effective way, because we're still doing litter picking in 10, 20, 30 years time. So if you can join up with anybody or find out about where the rubbish is coming from, and it's a lot of plastic. Coca-Cola are the worst plastic polluter on the planet. Going back to the companies and trying to stop that at source. And also it's another thing, going back to our MPs and saying we need more action on disposable plastics, mostly. And then at the other end of it, we were talking about recycling in our group, but if we feel really good about our recycling and we send it off, and I do my recycling in the hope that it ends up actually being recycled, but if it's taken to other countries where they can't cope with it and they either burn it, which will lead to carbon emissions, and we all know where that goes, and if they can't cope with it at all, a lot of it gets lost en route, and a lot of it ends up in their waterways, which will pollute their countries and end up in the sea as well. So looking a little bit outside just our litter picking. But litter picking is a really good thing to do, and it's visible, and it's something people feel they can do, and it does promote more of a conversation around the whole issue. Single use.
And it also can,
Thanks.
if it's done, we've got a group in Rye, the strandliners, who don't just pick the litter up, but they analyse it, they count it, they weigh it, they keep statistics, and they send these statistics in to the people who need to know about these statistics. And this is even better. And they say, don't just pick it up, note it and tell somebody about it.
Yeah,
So,
I've done quite a few talks with Andy Dinsdale from Strandliners. We kind of do a bit of a double act, and he was absolutely saying the same thing. But I think you've got to know how to do that, so it's good to join with a group or get some training from other people.
And interestingly, he said the same thing you did about cigarette butts, that a lot of the waste that ends up in the rivers near Rye and down into the beaches is in fact dropped by people in inland towns and coming down through the river systems. So this litter doesn't just stop where you drop it even. Mark, I think you've got a new thing. Is this something on the seaweed revolution?
Yes, I just sprinted out to the car because I'm doing a talk on climate change tomorrow in Belfast, and my notebook was in the car, and I thought I better look this up because I read a very good book on the seaweed revolution by, it's difficult, Vincent Dumenzel. I wonder if he's French. Catherine will Google that and tell us who he was. I can't remember, but he was talking about the potential of seaweed farming, and that's been done traditionally, I think, in East Africa and East Asia to a smallish scale, but apparently there's an awful lot of potential to use microalgae as a food source that would take the pressure off some of the intensive land farming. I don't know whether you've any thoughts or comments about that, Jane.
I think if people value it as a product, then there's more likely to be the energy and the funding put into it as a project. So yeah, I think that's a good idea, and it grows really fast, and you don't have to spray it, you don't have to plough the land, it doesn't even take any land space. So at the moment I'd say yes, I can't see any problems. Sometimes when we do these things we find problems down the line, don't we? But yeah, I mean, we have been eating seaweed for years, haven't we? Hundreds of years. So we just need to bring it back into fashion a bit more.
Absolutely. Sophie had a more sort of general philosophical thought following your talk. Sophie, do you want to unmute yourself and say it?
Yes.
Good.
My question was that, well, my granddaughter is 6 years old, so she won't be much older than your grandson in 2050. Do you really think she will be able to swim in the sea with her children, saying it was hard work, we couldn't do it when I was a little girl, but now we can? Is the world going to go that much better?
If I didn't think there was any hope, then I wouldn't do it. I think I just give up. I think that we have to live in and act in active hope, don't we? It's no good just thinking, oh well, I hope somebody else sorts it out, and it's no good thinking, oh well, it's all awful, I'm not going to do anything. That's why we're all here, isn't it? We want to make it better, and it's part of our survival for our DNA and our children and our children to go on. So absolutely, I think we can do it. It's a hard work. It's a hard row to hoe. We can give it a go.
There are quite a few deadlines by 2030, and 2030 is only 5 years away. And I thought, how are they going to do it? Oh, but 2050, I suppose.
I guess my take on this,
can do
Sophie
it.
and Jane, is that we may not get the whole way, but we can slow it down. We can make it better than it would be if we don't all work together to try and make it better. You know,
Okay. So I'll keep my hopes up.
keep on going.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that
Okay.
maybe will make it be less bad than it would be if we stop now. And
Okay.
by the things that we have managed to get done, that is slowing things down a bit. You know, so just keep going. Catherine, did you want to come in? Yes.
Thank you.
I've just got a one-liner that I heard today for the first time that adds to what Jane has just said and you've just said, Barbara, answering Sophie's question. And that one-liner is that to hope we look beyond what is to what could be, and we summon the courage to bridge the gap.
That's lovely.
Yeah, that's lovely. Now we've got a more concrete question here from Rod. Rod, do you want to unmute yourself and ask it, Rod? Or what?
Yes, I can do. Yes, thank
you.
you.
About dredging?
Yes. I've heard that people will drop concrete traps into the sea in order to prevent trawlers from dredging. Do you advocate that as a good policy?
That's Greenpeace.
Greenpeace.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I'm all one for a bit of sabotage. Yeah, because a lot of them are acting illegally, and if they are doing that in areas that they shouldn't be, then they need to be stopped. Because when there's no fish left, it's no good turning around then and saying, oh, perhaps we should have done something. We have to do it while stocks are high enough that they can cover. So I would say yes, but then I've been an activist for quite a while, so maybe that makes me a little bit more positive for that sort of thing. Do you agree with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Happening.
And they make quite good habitats as well, because things can grow in and out of them and latch onto them. So yeah.
As the wind turbines are off the coast of Brighton, they're providing a reef for other things to grow on. John Anderson, you've got your hand is raised. Is that to agree, or would you like to say something?
I'd like to say something. Just
come on then.
Holland and Barrett sell seaweed in little sachets. Then I put some in my wife's Christmas stocking, and it was not met with great delight.
Oh.
Right, I don't know what you say to that. Oh,
you have to spend the year telling her about the delights of help.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, anybody for any more questions? Anything else you'd like to put in? Any more suggestions like Rod's for what we can proactively do? We can't all carry concrete blocks out. Oh, Judith, have you got something to show us?
It's
our crispy sweetbread fins.
well.
All right. Okay.
And they've got hardly any calories. So if I want to split them, then I can. They taste okay. And I think you meant it's very, very thin.
Okay. Oh,
lovely.
All right. Okay. That looks rather attractive colour, doesn't it? Right. Okay, you carry on enjoying eating that, Judith, while we hear what Daniel's got to say. Daniel? You need to unmute yourself.
I shared this in my in the breakout room, but I work for a local rivers trust, and I'm obviously just very conscious of the link between seas and rivers. And to be honest, the link between water in all forms everywhere. So it's really just to make the point that while not all of us may live close to the sea and perhaps necessarily feel we can do something at that level, we all use water. And the water that we use will end up in the sea. So, to bring things back home, a lot of this is just about how we use water, how much water we use, what we do with it, what we flush down with it. You know, it's all looking upstream, as it were. All these things make a difference. Even just, you know, the amount of water that's going into storm drains because of lack of soakaways and taking with it. You know, and the amount of water that we flush down our sinks and toilets. So yeah, it's just being conscious of how we use water and how much water we use even does all make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry I didn't really touch on rivers because I had to cut my PowerPoint down because it wouldn't send by email. It was too big. So I'd actually taken, there was where I talked about agricultural runoff causing eutrophication and thinking again about the industrial farming. So like the River Wye has got terrible problems, hasn't it, with chicken sheds, huge chicken sheds. They sound like they're quite nice, and then you realise they're like industrial factories. So
hey,
yeah,
Jane, if you tell us you took some out, we might invite you back for Mark 2 on rivers.
well, it sounds like Daniel could do rivers just as well.
Okay, Mark, Dick, last question. And then we're
just following on from Daniel and the rivers. I mean, in our breakout room, I was talking about the eutrophication in Loch Ness and the big problems that we have come in Northern Ireland with the industrial agriculture, and we were linking that to a plant-based diet. But just to finish with it, I also mentioned our Climate Solutions book club has been getting quite depressed with its reading lately, so they've promoted this month something a little bit more positive, and it happens to be called Fairhaven by Steve Willis and Jan Lee, and it's all about the ocean in the future and giving a more optimistic future of how the ocean can be used as part of the regenerative recovery from the climate crisis, or the poly crisis, if you want, and it's I haven't quite finished it yet, but it's been a very good positive read. So that's links in very well with all Jane's been saying this evening.
I'd like to read that if I can get the title of that. Great.
I'll putting it in the chat now. Yes. I always go to the Goodreads website that gives you author and title if you click on that.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion, Mark. Daniel, were you wanted to come in just on that, or was your hand still left up? Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, I'm going to bring this to a close, but it's been such a fascinating and interesting talk, Jane. Thank you so much. We've really enjoyed that. Well, I don't know whether joy is the right thing, because some of the things you're talking about were really hugely serious and dire.
But been stimulated.
Yeah, really super. Thank you.
Thank
you, Jane.
And we're going to ask Jane finally to just end with a final prayer. And Jane has brought one to share with us. So over to you, Jane. Thank you.
A prayer of praise, Almighty God, Creator. All things from the greatest to the smallest owe their origin to you. As we look at the sea in all its moods and think of the life that it contains, we are reminded of how wonderful you are. We consider the mighty waves and we remember your power. We think of the countless creatures who make their homes in or on or beneath the waves, and we wonder at your generosity. We think of rock pools filled with life and we marvel at your attention to detail. We think of the ocean depths and we realize that there is no end to your knowledge and understanding. Yet even the sea, in all its variety and richness, only gives us a glimpse of how marvellous you are in every possible way. Gracious God, for all that you are and for all that you will be, we praise your holy name. Amen.